countries need to translate goals into guns.
U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth on Wednesday had a warning for Russia on the Ukraine war.
Now, if this war does not end, if there is no path to peace in the short term, then the United States, along with our allies, will take the steps necessary to impose costs on Russia for its continued aggression. If we must take this step, the U.S. War Department stands ready to do our part in ways that only the United States can do.
Hegseth spoke at a meeting of the Ukraine Defense Contact Group of Kyiv's allies at NATO headquarters in Belgium's capital, Brussels. His comments come as U.S. President Donald Trump's administration is considering a request by Ukraine for long-range Tomahawk missiles.
This is not a war that started on President Trump's watch, but it will end on his watch. So let us seize this moment, strongly forge peace in Ukraine, and let's bring peace through strength. Thank you very much.
Hegseth called on NATO allies to increase spending on purchases of U.S. weapons for Ukraine, following a report that highlighted a sharp decline in Western military support for Kyiv in July and August. He urged allies to ramp up investment in the prioritized Ukraine Requirements List program, which replaced U.S. arms donations to Ukraine and now requires allies to pay for U.S. weapons deliveries. NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte said he expected further pledges, noting that $2 billion had already been committed through the program. But that amount falls short of the $3.5 billion Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky had hoped to secure by October. Sweden, Estonia, and Finland pledged funds on Wednesday. Bigger powers, including France and Britain, have not made such commitments.